For the larger pumpkin, you'll need a carvable foam pumpkin, a sweater that you're willing to cut up, decorator's needles with a large eye to thread the cotton floss, jute, chalk paint. I'm using Gorilla hot glue sticks. You'll need a glue gun and a paintbrush. For the smaller foam pumpkin, you'll need the same supplies and also one of these smaller foam pumpkins. The first step of the large foam pumpkin is to remove the stem, and if you just twist it, it comes out easily, and paint the pumpkin with the chalk paint. Now, I did try just a regular craft paint initially, and it did not give me the coverage that I wanted. And with the chalk paint, I was able to get complete coverage with one coat, so that bright orange does not show through on the sweater. Once it's all painted, just set this aside and allow it to dry completely. The next step is to measure your foam pumpkin. I know mine is not painted in this step, but after making mine, I found it would work better to paint it first and allow it to dry while I do these next steps. So I'm measuring my pumpkin here, and mine measures 18.5 inches wide, and I'm going to remove the stem for a more accurate length measurement. Just twist and wiggle. And from center to center was 8.25 inches. So my pumpkin was 18.5 by 8.25 inches, and I'm using an extra large sweater here. So my sweater was wide enough where I could get a strip all the way across on the upper part of the sweater here to cover that pumpkin. And I measured mine ahead of time, and I cut this initial rectangle at 18 because the sweater has stretch to it, but I kept the length measurement at 9.5 inches. Even though this measurement was 8.25, I wanted to make sure I had enough to tuck it in on both sides. And here I'm just checking for the fit, and I'm marking where these two ends overlap. And I see that I need to cut about 2 inches off. So I'm going to take a pin and just mark where I want to cut. Next, you're going to place your rectangle right sides together, and you're going to take this to the machine and stitch 1/2 inch along the edge. So here I'm taking it to the machine, and I know my hand's in the way here, but I do move it. And you're going to stitch in 1/2 inch seam all the way down. And just be careful not to pull so it doesn't get all ruffled, and stitch all the way to the end. So after stitching, this is what it should look like. So now we have a tube. This is where the stitching is. I'm just trimming my thread in here, showing you the seam and turning our tube right side out. I wanted to show you an option without a sewing machine, and this I found to be just as easy. Using that large decorator's needle and the cotton floss, we're going to stitch a seam just like we would with the sewing machine. But if you don't have a sewing machine, or you don't know how to sew with a sewing machine, this works just as well. So here I'm going to show you how to thread the needle. We're going to take the cotton floss, and you want a piece long enough to weave in and out along the sweater. I find twice as long as the length you're stitching is a good rule of thumb. So take your needle, and I pull the thread really taut over the top of the needle, and it makes kind of like a crease in the thread, and I slide that off, pinching that crease, and then take the eye of the needle and push the folded thread through the eye of the needle. Pull your tail out, and I leave about a 4-inch, 5-inch, 6-inch, really doesn't matter here, just long enough that it doesn't pull out tail on my thread. And then slide your fingers down towards the end, and we're gonna make our knot. So you take your thread, and I crisscross to make an X. You wanna leave a little tail of about 1 inch or so. Then roll your thumb over the top of those threads and slide your finger and the thread down to make a knot. And just pull that tail out. I'll show you one more time. So make an X, crossing your thread, roll your thumb over the top of the thread, slide your finger down towards the bottom, pull your tail, and you have a knot in your thread. Now we're ready to start stitching. So take your fabric and place right sides together, and we are going to push our needle into both layers of the sweater here and pull our needle all the way through to get that knot at the end of the fabric. And then I push the needle from the back to the front, and I'm leaving a 1/4 of an inch in between my stitches, and I weave the needle back and forth through both layers from the front and put a few stitches on and pull my needle and thread through the fabric. I just wanted to zoom in to show you up close. So push through both layers of the fabric, about a 1/4 of an inch, weaving back and forth, a few stitches on the needle, and then pull the needle through, pull the thread out nice and straight. You don't want it to be gathered. And continue working this way all the way to the edge of the fabric. Once you get all the way to the end, just make sure your fabric isn't gathered, and then we're going to tie off our thread. So I push my needle in and I pick up a few of the stitches of the sweater. And don't pull your needle out, just push the tip of it through. Take your thread and wrap it around that front of the needle once, twice, and then pull the needle through. And this makes a knot in the thread. Now for security, I like to double knot mine. So we're going to do the same thing again. Pick up a few stitches here of the sweater and push just the tip of my needle through. I'm going to wrap the thread once, twice, and then pull my needle through. I like to hold my thumb here to keep the thread from knotting and getting tangled. And then I come down just a little ways and pull my needle out, and then I'm going to trim my thread. This just leaves the tail with a little bit of length to it, and trim your threads from your initial knot. Okay, so whether you sewed your tube with a sewing machine or hand sewing, the next step is going to be taking the carvable pumpkin and cutting out a hole large enough to tuck the end of the sweater in. This step is messy, and so you're going to want to make sure that your work surface is clear from any of these little foam pieces. So now we're going to take the tube with the right sides out, and we're going to do a test fit to make sure that the holes we cut are large enough to tuck the ends of the sweater into. And it does get kind of bulky, so before applying any glue to it, I tuck in all the ends just to make sure that they fit and that my hole is large enough before I apply any glue. And you only want to tuck in as much as needed to just cover the bottom there, and then I check to make sure that I have enough to cover the top as well before applying the glue. So here I'm going to put a rim of the glue around the foam pumpkin and then start tucking in the ends of my sweater. And I like to kind of fold them, like pleat it as I go. And as needed, just add a dab of glue to get that sweater to stick in there. And continue pushing the ends into the hole of the pumpkin, adding any glue as needed. Now for the other side, we are going to do the same thing, but we need to make sure that our hole is large enough to tuck the sweater ends in, plus whatever you're using as a stem. And for my stem, I'm using a piece of driftwood, a little stick. You can use sticks from your yard. I've seen people use mulch, but my hole was not large enough to fit the ends of my pumpkin, so I am cutting mine larger, and then I'm going to do a test fit again to make sure that the hole is big enough this time. I think this step is really important before adding the glue. Just make sure that it fits. And then here is my driftwood stem, and my hole is the right size. So now I'm just going to add a rim of glue and start tucking in the ends of my sweater like I did on the other side, adding glue as needed. And again, I like to pleat mine. I just think it gives it a nicer, more finished look. Tucking in those ends adding glue. And then once that is finished, it's time for the stem. So I put a good amount of glue down in the hole there, pressed my stem down as far as I wanted it. I held it there for a second just to let the glue catch it. And now your large sweater pumpkin is finished. Now we're going to use the sleeves of the sweater to cover the small foam pumpkins, and the cuff on my sweater had a different pattern to it, and I am going to cut off the cuff of my sweater. And then I'm going to cut off the sleeve of the sweater. And this is what we're going to use to cover the foam pumpkins. Now it depends on what size sweater you're using. Mine is a women's extra large. And from my sweater, I was able to get 2 of the foam pumpkins, the smaller foam pumpkins, per sleeve. So I'm just folding it over in half and then cutting my sleeve into 2. Now for the small foam pumpkin, we're going to follow the same steps. We're going to take a serrated knife and cut out our hole in the top and the bottom of the pumpkin. And we're going to do a dry fit to make sure that the hole is large enough to tuck in this sweater. And just make sure to keep your work surface clear. This is messy, and I just continually try to sweep this out of my work surface area. A little bit of a losing battle because it always seems to be a few more that come out. One thing that is great about using the sleeves of the sweater is that it's no sew. You don't have to sew the tube. I like the larger sweater pumpkins for the size, so to me it was worth sewing them, but you could keep this entire project no sew by just using the sleeves of the sweaters to make the pumpkins. So here I'm just doing the test fit to make sure that if I tuck the ends in on one side, I have enough of the sleeve to cover the other side before gluing, and also to make sure that that hole was large enough to tuck all the ends in. So I just ran a line of glue around the edge, and I'm tucking and folding kind of like a pleat and adding glue as needed and tucking the ends of the sweater into this end of the pumpkin. I did end up using the end of my knife to kind of push it in there. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Test fit again. Make sure my hole is large enough. And then I'm going to open it back up and add a bead of glue around the edge and tuck the ends of my fabric in again. I found the stem on these pumpkins to be cute. The gold stem fit really well in my daughter's room, and since I was making several of these, I decided to make some using the gold stem. So here I'm finishing it off, just showing you that you could use the stem that came with the pumpkins. Just the same way, after you finish tucking in the ends, just add that stem back in there. You can add some glue if you want, but I thought it looked really cute just with the stem that it came with. And then here is another option for finishing the stem using another piece of driftwood stick. And I made some like this as well so that I could have some big and small pumpkins with driftwood stems. So here is your small pumpkin. And I think these turned out really cute. I think you get a lot of them from a sweater, and they make really great fall decorations. Here's how the small and the large pumpkin turned out. I think they turned out really cute. They were very easy to make, fun to make. a great use of repurposing a sweater you have. They would be great in other fall colors or a mix of different neutrals. The possibilities of these really are endless. I hope you give this project a try.